Thank you very much for the introduction. How many people are awake? I'm sure everybody had a great lunch. You're all okay? Yeah? Can you have a round hello? Yeah, thank you very much. So, I represent Societe Generale. Some of you who has not heard about this company called Societe Generale, it's European largest financial groups. It's a French bank, what you can locally call it as. We have a business in 67 countries. Just want to quickly skip through. So as you can see, our core business are on the three pillars, which is the French retail banking, the IBFS, what we call it as, and the GBIS, as you can see. We have our presence in 67 countries, and we have 149,000 employees working for the bank. And here in GSC, what we call, which is Global Solution Center in Bangalore, and we also have our presence in Chennai, where the IT solutions are being handled here, along with some of the operations for the group. Also. So our core value, as you can see, is the team spirit, innovation, commitment, and responsibility, which lies our core responsibility of making the group better and better as we progress. So some of you would be wondering what is bank doing in post-grey and what is it all about. Societe Generale is, as we can see, it's a techno-savvy company where the number speaks. We have an IT budget of 4 billion. We have staff of more than 23K in IT alone, in the global. And then we have more than 4+ million apps getting downloaded, and we have 1,500+ API in production. And some of the APIs have been developed internally by SG Group, and most probably in GSC. Okay, so that's setting the context about the company, which is my duty. We are part of it and we are proud. And both of us have spent more than 9 years in the company, still going strong. Good, so what we do in open source is, this is the three pillars that we have as a strategical matter of fact, that we use, contribute, and attract. What we call it as use is like, strategically, we first think of what open source is required for any solution that we are thinking for the business, and even for the business to suggest them, we always urge them to think open source. Open source could be anything. It's not necessarily database, but also the middleware, the scheduler, the monitoring, the API, the application development. So we urge the people to think open source first. That's the use pillar. And then in case if there is any alternative that is required, we then again think of open source first and then move with, if the open source is not catering to the business need, then we ask them to think of another solution. And then we have the support, which is the most important. We care for the people who are either performing their operations or using the IT. The support is something which is very important. So first we think the support strategy to be in place before we do anything in the company. In terms of contribution, whatever we use, we want to contribute back to the community. So what we are going to see is how we have been contributing back to the community. We don't not only use the community version of different open source solutions, but we also give it back to the community. So what we have done, I'll just touch base on that. And of course, on the attract, is something like, what's the point in using and contributing? We need to have more customers back onto us. So what we do, we participate in these kind of events and communicate to the business and give them how they can utilize the open source solutions, which is either in-house or that's available in the community for serving their business needs. Okay. So this is the part of our developer group. Anthony, who is our principal engineer, he's based in Paris. So I'm showcasing only those people who are related to this Postgre, who has done some contributions. So you can see these people in our fork online in GitHub/Society General. Anthony has been the creator of Code to PG, which is the solution for estimating on the code, the embedded SQLs which are there to migrate to Postgre. The Venkata, who is joining along with me, he will be the next speaker to give you all the technical insights about our migration. And we have Karthik and Kiran, who have been developers contributing to Aura to PG and Code to PG, which are the tools that we have been using. Okay, so what's our migration processes, and to give you a little bit about the statistics. So some of the Tamil Nadu people will be able to relate this acronym, SETC. The study is what we do, which is a feasible study on the applications. Today morning, the keynote I attended, he was saying 30% of the applications are being migrated to Postgre or open source. So in Societe General also, we take around 30% to be migrated from different vendor footprints to go to open source. So as part of it, first we do the study. We perform the feasibility of moving to open source, whether the open source is catering to the same kind of features, same kind of business risk that we have is all being mitigated by the open source solutions that we have. And then we perform the estimation, which is the key. How long does it take? What is the cost involved? So all these things becomes the part of our study, and then we move on to the execute. We migrate and then perform the testing, similar to SLDC process, and then we do train, because a lot of application team who are new to open source, the guys may or may not know how to support the application post the migration. So we give them on-the-job training, and of course the documentation, which is a part of it. And then last but not the least is the carrying of whatever applications that we have migrated to the open source. We support them, and we also bug fixes and then tune the performance. Okay. So all these things are part of what I lead the team called OMF, which is Open Source Migration Factory. So we are basically a team of 10 people who does the migration for the entire group. So we have done close to 125 plus databases migrated from different technologies, which is Oracle, MS SQL, MySQL, Sybase as well. There are close to 150 plus databases instances which we have in pipe. So how we have chosen these databases is we have not gone into the critical mass of the application. So things which are medium and are able to move to the open source, those are the kind of databases that we have taken. And round about our time to market, which is, we call it as time to market. I'm not sure if many people understand it. It's time to go to the production. Okay, so that's around 2 to 12 weeks is what we have taken in terms of the kind of critical databases that we take it under our migration factory. As you can see, the delivery time, it's always been 100% of the data, because we are using a tool which could probably do the migration quicker and faster. In terms of the coding, as part of any of the migration is not an easy task, as some of you would agree. It's a challenge in itself. That's what we are going to go through. While we perform the coding, there's a challenge that is involved where the logic needs to be understood. You may not have the same kind of functions what was written in the original vendor software to have the equivalent straightforward conversion in the open source. So we have to tweak it. So sometimes the timelines do skip. That's why that's 70% in the coding that we have. In terms of applications, the kind of this heaviness of the applications, we have taken a simple to complex. We have done more than 100K lines of code conversions in those applications that we have. Setting this context to go much deeper in terms of the nuances of what is the experience that we have, I invite Venkat to take it forward. Who will talk about our experience and what are the challenges and how we tackled it with these 125 and other applications that we are going to handle. Thank you.
Sure, that one. For you to put, yeah. Thank you. Am I audible? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Raman. Just a small correction about myself, I'm associated with Societe Generale since past 8 years now, and I have total 12 years of experience working with the databases. Yeah, it was just a small correction. Yeah, and I just want to make a statement here, like, in the interest of time, I need to, rush the slides quickly. And any of the concepts or any of the scenarios what I am going to talk about, if you are not able to understand, then I will be here around today and tomorrow, and you can catch it with me. Is it okay? Yeah. Yeah. To start with, as he said, as Raman said, we have a team of 10 enthusiastic developers who have taken up the challenge of, helping our organization to move and incorporate the open source culture. Okay, and one such initiative is the migration, which is called as the Migration Factory. Now, what I am going to talk about here is, it is going to be a tip of the iceberg, because we took only certain scenarios which we thought that it might interest you in terms of takeaways, so that anybody who is working on the migration front can use the experience what we had and implement in their own environment. Okay. May I know how many of you are currently working on migration projects? Oh, that's a quite a good number. Yeah, I hope these experiences will add value for your work. Okay. Now, before I start talking about the migrations, what I would like to tell you about the way Societe Generale is actually using Postgre. It is not a standalone installations what the normal traditional legacy installations used to happen in the infrastructure. So, have you heard about this term ZAS? How many of you are aware of that? Good. Yes. Okay. So, it would interest me if I can add some information to it. Now, ZAS is is going to be the de facto model when you move to cloud. Okay. The ZAS is called as anything as a service. Okay. When anything as a service, when we say, then why do we leave Postgre apart? Correct. So, that's the way we have planned ourselves, and we have started to integrate Postgre into our ZAS model, and we provide Postgre as a service to the internal customers what we have on our private cloud. If you check the model, the cloud model what we have is a multi-cloud model, which is the hybrid. It includes the private and the public cloud, and this Postgre as a service is part of the private cloud offering what we have. Okay. So, these are some of the additional services what we provide as part of our private cloud offering. Okay. Then, moving to our experiences what we had, we have been working since past 1.5 years to 2 years with respect to the migration. We started with Oracle, and then slowly we picked up with SQL Server and MySQL, and we are doing a POC on Sybase migration. Okay. Now, these are some of the important things what we thought, like, it would add value if we talk about the experiences what we had. So, I am going to share about these things. Okay. To start with, this is a peculiar case with a SQL Server migration what we were actually trying to do, and this particular application was using the encryption function which is provided by the SQL Server. Okay. Now, the challenge for us was to migrate the data into Postgre and provide the similar kind of architecture to the application team. Okay. Now, when we initially did that, we extracted the data, we loaded the data into Postgre. Then obviously, when you extract the data which is already encrypted, it doesn't make sense for the application team to use it. And when the data was encrypted using SQL Server encryption algorithm, then you can't decrypt it on Postgre, right? It is quite logical, correct? So what we did is like we asked the application team to provide the extraction of the data, okay, which is a plain text data, and then we implemented the PG crypto extension on Postgre, okay. Then we defined the key so that it can encrypt the data, load the data, and then it would help to extract the data, right. So when we installed this PG crypto encryption extension, it provides two functions, that is PG sim encrypt and decrypt, okay. So this was quite helpful for us to integrate the architecture, the same architecture which was available with SQL Server, and provide it on Postgre. So that was that was one of the foundation laying migration what we did, because there were other lined up applications which were depending on the outcome of this migration. Yeah, makes sense. Then FDW and MView. I hope people who are working in migration, they have heard about foreign data wrappers and how useful it is, right? And we also explored different options to migrate the data, and we also compared like which of the approach would be helpful and which would be faster for us to complete the migration, right? So in one such case, there was an application requirement. It was actually it had two different databases, in fact two different applications, and they were designing one application where they wanted the data of these two applications to be available locally on Postgre, right. So still those two applications are in Oracle, and the third one which they are creating, they wanted to be in Postgre. Now we did a POC, like we tried to use Ora to PG, okay, Ora to PG, and it was quite difficult for us to script it, run it every day, and bring that data locally into Postgre. There were a lot of issues pertaining to constraints, and then again discarded data, right? All those challenges were there. So we had to do a brainstorming, okay, and then we thought that FDW would be the best approach in this terms, okay. So what we did is like we installed foreign data wrappers, we created the servers, all the normal methods which you require to configure FDW, you have to do that, okay. Now after doing that, you create the foreign tables, and then on that foreign tables we created materialized views. Now that makes fairly simple the approach of bringing the data from two different Oracle databases and host it on Postgre locally, okay. Now one of the catchy point or one of the significant improvement what the application team found was, before this kind of approach, they used to they had another third Oracle database which they wanted to access these two databases, and every night Arman job used to run, which used to bring down the data. It was completely an online restoration where every night it used to happen, and the whole of the process used to take some 2.5 hours to 3 hours. And with this materialized view approach, the whole of the data was able to bring it to locally within like 1 hour time. So that was the significant achievement what we had with this kind of approach. And here you see the steps what we had used to create the extension, the materialized view, how do you refresh it. So this kind of approach would help you if you have the same kind of scenario. The only challenge would be you need to develop the batch jobs if you want to if you have 300 400 tables to refresh every night, then you create a batch job and run the batch job with some scheduler. Yeah. Then anybody faced challenges with LOB objects? When you work with a completely open source approach, there are a lot of challenges when you have to deal with LOB objects. Now one such challenge what we faced was like, the whole of the database was 300 GB. It is fairly, not that large. But when you have LOBs, that can, put you into a lot of problem. So we had such kind of problem, and when initially we went with the traditional approach of extracting the data, it almost, it ran for 72 hours. It almost ran for 3 days, while the application was ready to do the migration only during the time of 12 to 13 hours. So if I have to do a migration for 72 hours, none of the application would get ready to move to Postgre, correct? So we had to, define an approach, like how do we do it and how do we shrink the whole of the migration time within, the permissible limit of 12 hours, correct? So for this, if you see, we had to apply a strategy. We did a brainstorming and applied a strategy, like 300, 400 tables were there. So we had to segregate according to the sizes, and LOB tables, we completely, sorted that out. And the rest of the tables which were large, which were more than 10 GB of table, that was put into another lot, small were put into another lot. So all these strategy we did, and we ran it in parallel. Okay, the small tables we ran it in parallel. Immediately after that, we ran the medium tables, and at the end we had to run the LOB table extraction. Now when we did that, if you see this Ora2PG config parameters, these parameters actually helped us to tune the LOB extraction and bring down the extraction to 10 hours time, and doing the other activities, we were able to achieve the whole of the migration within 11 to 12 hours. Good. Now by TR to OID, anybody have experience or face this kind of issue anytime? OID. Okay. So some of the softwares, they have a peculiar requirement that my application will not work if you migrate or if you change the data type of my column, right? So one such application we had, where in Oracle it was LOB, and when they moved to Postgre, the vendor said that no, I need OID column for it. And it was a very big challenge for us when we wanted to convert the data type from ByteR to OID, because when you use Ora2PG, it gets converted to ByteR, right? So that was one of the challenge. What we did was, we brought the data through Ora2PG, put it in Postgre in all the tables as ByteR only. Okay. Then we created another table, so that we can extract the data and put it in this table, which had OID column. So when we were trying to do that, this error we were getting, and it was I've just put a snippet of the error. There were a lot of errors like this, okay, which indicated that when you are trying to insert the data, the Postgre is not allowing you to do it in a direct way, right? So you have to have another method to implement this, right? So that method was something like, you have to create a function which is something like blob_write, which it is not developed by us, but we had to do a thorough internet research, blogs, we had to follow up with several people, and then we came across this function what we had to write and implement. So we wrote this function, and then we defined a cast over it. Now what this approach does is, whenever you insert the records into the table which has OID, internally the data is managed and you don't get to know, but you will have the data ultimately loaded into OID column. And this was again a kind of requirement for many of the applications, because this is very peculiar, as I said, is more to the third party softwares, if you are using any, right. Now dynamic partitions, anybody, I know, those who have done the migration, they would have got this situation of creating the partitions, and there are several methods to implement it. But ultimately what happens is, the application team, they don't manage the partitions every year, and they would request you that, I don't want to manage the partitions, and whenever I load the data according to my condition, be it range or be it list, the partitions should get created automatically, right. So, that was one this was one such scenario we had, and it was version 9.6, because the latest versions have more advanced features when you want to implement the partitions, right. So, here what we did is like we implemented the inheritance approach. I am sure people might be knowing about it. We implemented the inheritance approach of moving the partitions from Oracle to Postgre, and the way we did is like we did not extract the partition data as it is in Oracle. What we did is we disabled the partitions when we were extracting the data from Postgre. If you are not aware, like Oracle PG provides a parameter which is called disable partition. If you disable it, then whole of the data of the partitions come into one single table when you extract it, right. The same table you are going to load it into Postgre, you will have the whole data into a Postgre table, and there you start to manipulate it to create the partitions, right. So, this is one such approach what we followed to to have the partitions created. This is the initial setup. I have not yet gone to the dynamic partition creation script now. This is the normal approach what you follow to get the data from Oracle PG to partition tables in Postgre. Okay. Then once the partitions are created, how do you make it dynamic? The dynamic partition creation function is something like this. So, you can also use this kind of function to create based on the partitioning condition what you have in Oracle. Yeah. So, you may need to modify this to create the partitions according to your requirement. Okay. Then once you create that function, obviously you have to create a trigger on the table, otherwise the function will not get called every time, right. So, you create a trigger on it. So, once you create the trigger on it, the moment you insert it, the trigger will call the function which you created for dynamic partition creation. Now, what that function will do is it will try to check if a partition is already existing. If the partition is not existing, it will create one and then it will load the data into it, correct. And a view sorry. Yes, it creates a new partition. It checks whether a partition is already there or not based on your condition. Maybe you are partitioning based on the range, partitioning based on the list, right. The partition condition you might give as a date, right. So, when you insert the data, you will obviously insert according to the date condition, right. So, when you give the date condition, it will check whether the partition is existing. If it is existing, it will load the data. If it is not existing, it will create the partition and then load the data. If you see the highlighted part, that was a test made. I mean, because of the organization regulations, I cannot put the real data here. So, these are all test data. Okay. So, if you see the highlighted one, it shows that the moment you inserted the data according to the date, it created a new partition which is 04. Yeah. PG Partman will also do that, but there it is an extension, and we had challenges to install it because of some rules and regulations. Any extension which you need to install, it has to pass through some securities and all to implement that for us. So, that way it created a lot of problem for us. So, that is the reason we have not used PG Partman. It was instant. There was no performance degradation at all after we created that, but I would say the maximum test what we did was 10 lakh rows, but if you have more, then you may need to have a performance tuning approach applied to it. Yeah.
You spoke about migrating the data unpartitioned and then loading it into partitions. So, any reason why you did that? Like, why transfer the data without the partitions and then load it back?
Okay. So, that way when we tested it with the partitions, we were getting a lot of constraint issues, and then it was taking a lot of time also. When you enable that, by default it is enabled. If you enable that, every partition it starts to read it. every partition it starts to read it, it creates in a different file. You know, it doesn't write it to a single file, it creates multiple files. So, if you have like 10,000 partitions or 20,000 partitions, it is going to create a huge number of files, and every file it has to go and write. So, that's why, you know, we wanted to eliminate that, and let's provide a single IO and write it. So, what we observed is like it gives a better performance than the you know you try to extract partition wise.
But this would have been an offline migration, right? I mean, the application would have been down for the period.
That you know, that you do it only during the production, but normally, you know, you do it when the application is live, is online. So, that's the thing. Okay. ETL jobs, you know, ETL jobs are more common jobs for any of the applications, right? There are very rarely applications which doesn't use ETL, even if it is a small file loading every day, they do some of the other loading, right? Now, in some cases you have this ETL job which is more prominent, okay, and then what happens is like and more specifically, if you have a commercially available ETL softwares and you are using it, that could create a lot of problems when you are migrating to a different environment. Okay. So, one such challenge for us was this case, okay, where the migration was a normal requirement for us. We did the migration. Okay, migration was very successful, all the coding part we changed, all the data was migrated, everything else was done. Now, their primary and the foremost requirement was to have an ETL job, okay, and that ETL job was taking around 20 minutes, okay, on Oracle, and they wanted the same performance. Because of the business reasons, they cannot accommodate more than 30 minutes of time. That was the max which they would be allowing us. Okay. Now, when we had this requirement and with the migrated data, when they were trying to run the ETLs, it was almost taking 6 hours without a traceable reason. So, then we started to dig it, and then, you know, we found that there are different there could be different approaches what what we can implement rather than using the commercially available ETL software, which is taking a lot of time for us. Then what we did is like, you know, we tried to test the approaches, something like PG loader. We wrote our own script which would use the inserts. Okay. Then what we did is like we divided the inserts into parallel jobs. Then ultimately we were able to achieve the whole of the job in 18 minutes. Then after all these gimmicks we did, they came up with the last requirement saying that you know, Oracle provides discarded rows. If a row doesn't get inserted, it provides the discarded rows, and that specifically we needed, which was not available in our approach. So, then again the struggle started, and then we wrote something called PG discard. It is not yet available in GitHub yet, because there are certain, you know, tests and security level things have to be passed so that we can make it public. Okay. So, with this the whole of the migration was successful. The reason for bringing this in front of you is like, if you have such kind of experiences, then you have to be very careful when you are, you know, dealing with the scenarios of this kind. Okay. Then other small nuggets, what we say, what I would like to bring in front of you is like, when you do the migration, be it code migration, data migration, there are certain things which are very obvious and you need to migrate it. Okay. Now, these are something like hierarchical queries. How does it work in Oracle, and how does it work in Postgre, right? So, these are some of the things, and most specifically you will have something called global variables in packages. When you migrate packages, then you have to be very careful when global variables are defined, and how do you know, get the same kind of situation available in Postgre is something with the set variable. As you know, less than Postgre 11, you might have to, you know, packages whatever are available in Oracle, it has to go to the functions part, right? So, when you have to achieve the same kind of global variables in function, you have to use something like set, and then you define your own variables and values if you want, right? And then autonomous transactions. Yeah, these two are more specific to Oracle. Oracle provides a very easy method of pragma autonomous transaction if somebody has used it, right, to independently execute the transactions, but it is not so easy to be implemented in Postgre. So, you need to have a concept which is called as DB link. Now, DB link, how do you use DB link is, you can install Postgre foreign data wrappers and loop back the DB link, so that you create a local session and commit the transactions within that session, and you achieve the same kind of feature what the Oracle provides. Yeah. Now, I think this is the last part what I wanted to share about our experiences. If you see the figures, they are, they are more attracting. 90% improvement in the performance when we migrated a query from Oracle to Postgre. Now, how did we achieve it? Because some of the correlated queries which were written in Oracle, when you migrate that, it gives a very bad performance. Now, I am not saying that this is an underlying statement, but it again becomes depends on the application, the way your application is written, the way the logic is written, right. The kind of experience what we had, when we had this experience, we changed it to with CTE clause, and the performance of the query was almost 90% improved. Yeah. And then 30%. When you use such kind of functions like upper or lower functions in the where clause, in the predicate clause, then you have to be very careful how the data is getting manipulated, how the data is actually stored in the column. That impacts a lot. So, what we did is, like when we created a function based indexes, it improved the query performance by 30%. And then there was a huge improvement in one of the logical change in a query, which was well handled in Oracle, because the logic itself was illogical, because there were a lot of loops happening in the query itself because of the where clause what they had mentioned. So, when we delivered it, and then when we came to know that there is a performance issue, we analyzed it, and then we decided that no, this logic is bad and we have to rewrite it. So, we changed the logic, and there was 120% of performance improvement in the query. And then 176%, this is it's a very great number, because there was a very peculiar situation here when if you refer back to the ETL, it's connected to the same thing. When they installed the third party tool, I don't want to name it, so when they installed it, they did not do it properly, that was specifically on production. And we went into a situation where the issue of the performance, where the job was taking 13 hours, which used to complete it in 1 hour 15 minutes in Oracle, it used to run for 13 hours, and we were in a situation of untraceable thing from where the performance is being hit. So, we did several, it was almost a week that we day and night worked to troubleshoot it, and then we decided that let us replicate this scenario in a different server. And when we replicated it, then we came to know that some of the ODBC driver links were not properly mapped, and it was quite fascinating and astonishing that this kind of small issue can cause you can put you on your toes, right. Our key tools, as we said, Aura2PG and Code2PG, right. Aura2PG almost everybody is aware of. Now, Code2PG is our home grown tool, which helps in estimating the application migration efforts which are required. Okay. So, I will quickly go through this Aura2PG, which everybody knows. This is the sample statement what you have to configure and run it. This again for MS SQL, we integrated this part to Aura2PG, that we are discussing with Gilles Darold, who is the owner of Aura2PG, to integrate this into the code. Yeah. It converts, but when you deploy it, if you are hitting any issue, it is not 100%. If you hit any issue, then you have to work on it to migrate it properly.
So, we need to create manually?
No, even the constraints it migrates. Okay. Even the constraints it migrates, but when you, again when I say that when you deploy it, since it is an open source tool, what we observed is sometimes, when it creates a foreign key constraint, like a big statement is there, what happens is you get a carriage return. There are small issues which gets executed when you try to deploy it, and there is a sequence issue also. Some of the tables, when you have a foreign key, then foreign key relation establishes saying that your master or child should have the foreign key first, right? And then the second one you will have the child one. So if the child gets executed first, then it will throw error saying that the key is not present in the master table, right? So you have to, when you get those kind of issues, then you have to align it and then execute it.
Okay, actually I am using one ETL tool for migration in MySQL to PostgreSQL 2 and Oracle to PostgreSQL 2, but data is migrated, but if you talk about the constraints and function, it will not work.
You can try probably Aura to PG, and I have given some contacts here. Maybe if you have some problem, then you can approach us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this we have integrated MS SQL recently, and it works very well. At least the data part we are confident, and we are still open that if somebody can contribute to improve it. And this is the sample report of Oracle. This is the same way the sample report gets generated for SQL Server also. Okay. And this code to PG, as I said, it is our homegrown tool, and it performs the estimations. It gives the HTML report of the source code what you provide. It also gives instructions that which line of the code you need to go and change it. Okay. So I would say that it works very well for the estimation part, 40 to 50%. It gives you a good this thing, and then as and when we use it, there are a lot of improvement areas which contributors can commit to it. This is again a sample statement of code to PG report, and this again, if you want to know more functionality of code to PG, it is available on public Git. You can go check and try it. Yeah. If you want to know more about us, then you can contact us in the given mail IDs. Yeah.
Do we have any questions?
What tool did you use for your SSO integration?
For?
SSO, single sign-on integration, like?
We did not use any tool for that migration. What we take care of is the complete data migration and the application code migration. The single sign-on or the user level access tool migration, we are not doing that. So, but yeah, if you have a case, then we can discuss and we can see like how, because it is again like we also want to know your experiences. It's kind of sharing the migration experiences. It all gets converted to functions. Basically, when you extract the code, there is one parameter called PG underscore version which you have to specify in Aura to PG, right? Your target version. If you say my target version is 9.6 or 10, it converts the code based on the target version. If you give 11 or 12, then your packages and procedures are get converted into procedures and packages only. Any more questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you Venkat, thank you Raman
you.
for the session. Thank you guys.